Hi there, my name is Rana, and this presentation is about how to design for the Internet of Things. Now, there have been many ways to define the Internet of Things, but here's a very simple way to understand it. This is nothing more than sensors attached to objects in a way that it makes a difference to your life. But here's the problem, there are just too many ideas. You don't know which ones are really good or which ones are completely silly. So how do you go about separating the gems from, pure corn? So here's what we did. We looked around for the best ideas in IoT. The ideas that made a real difference to people's lives, and deconstructed to figure out, one, how did they arrive at the problem, and two, how did they arrive at the solution. From this came the framework that we're about to show you, and we use the framework ourselves to construct completely new scenarios that we're building out now. Now, we know the best results come in a group, in a workshop, but we're putting out the framework so you can test the framework for yourself and give us feedback. Let's get started. So to do that, you need to figure out first what kind of a problem do you want to solve with sensors, and then how do you go about designing a solution that includes sensors. Now, as you think about sensors and solving problems using sensors, you have to think about the role they play in human lives. Are they bigger than us? Are they smaller than us? Are they the same size? Now, using sensors in a way that makes them bigger than us, the big brother problem, we don't think makes sense. It just scares people, and we're not ready for that yet. And using them in a way that connects things randomly, the washing machine to the mixie to the door, again, is meaningless, right? It's so small that it's useless. Now, using them in a way that's equal to us and extends us is interesting. For example, using drones to give access to areas that journalists just wouldn't have normally. So we say don't use sensors to compete with us or compete within us, instead use them to complete us. So we coined a phrase for it. We said sensors should be extensors. They should extend the range of our senses and improve our lives by doing so. So sensors should help you do things that you can't. So for example, you can't defuse a bomb better than a bomb disposal robot because it has nerves of steel, quite literally. Or sensors should help you do things that you don't want to. So if you're one of the lucky few people that likes cleaning your room, well, forget about sensors. Otherwise, find a way that sensors can do the job for you. Okay, so now we know the kind of job sensors should do for us, but in what kind of problems should they do these jobs? Well, big problems that are hard to see. And as you think about this frame of reference, you'll realize it's a very powerful frame of reference. For example, things could be hard to see simply because they're too small. There's such a tiny movement, there's such a small shift that your senses just don't register the change. For example, the amount of hydration in your favorite plant. Now, you want a plant to survive and thrive, but do you really know how much water is needed, and is it exactly the amount that it needs? Or the fact that your shoes wear out in a pattern which suggests a foot imbalance, which might give you knee aches later in your life. Now, you know it, but it's such a tiny movement you can't catch it. Or things could be hard to see because they're happening so quickly, they just happen too fast. For example, if you hydrated at just the right moment, you could have gone a mile further, but because you didn't, you dehydrated and hit a wall. It happened so quickly. Or for example, your team agreed on a specific game plan, but it changed when you played, and you couldn't figure out exactly when and how it changed and why. Or it could be hard to see because it happened so slowly, and our minds are terrible at making connections over time, so we just missed it. And the change in weather patterns is a classic example, right? You only know when it's really too hot, but you missed completely how it's been slowly heating up over the last 2 decades. So as you can see, you can come up with a lot of problems when you think about what is hard to see. But what we did was club everything into 2 buckets. The first we call problems of chaos. And these are problems where the system you're dealing with, whatever the size, has got some amount of chaos built into it. For example, a traffic jam, and sensors can bring order to the chaos. And the second bucket is what we call problems of limits to growth. And these are systems, again, at any scale you choose, are already very high performance, very highly ordered, but are at a limit of performance, and sensors help them to reach the next level. Okay, now that you have the problem, the next thing you need to do is ask how many people are facing this problem. Or as we say, what's the social size of the problem? What this means is it a problem faced by one person at a time? For example, your golf swing is sucky, but scales to a very large population. Or is it a problem faced by lots of people at the same time? For example, a traffic jam, and also scales to a very large population. Okay, so now that you figure out the kind of problem you want to solve and how many people are facing it, you can start designing the solution. And you do this by finding one or more hotspots in a given situation and picking the one which has got the most amount of pain. So let's see how. Let's take an example situation and see if you can find hotspots within it. For example, let's take a sports match and see if you can find hotspots inside of this. Now, any situation is combination of just three resources: men, material, and money. And these resources interact in the form of flow. So everything in the stadium is a flow. Fans are a flow, sports people are a flow, the food is a flow, electricity is a flow. But flows don't always work the way they should. That's why hotspots occur. So flows can stop suddenly, start suddenly, spike, get tangled. You get the idea. And because there can be so many resources and so many flows, it's really important that you pick from whose point of view do you want to understand the flow. So for example, in a stadium, you can take the fans' point of view and try and figure out what flow is interesting to the fans. Or you can take the team's point of view and figure out what flow is interesting for the team. Or for example, you can take the organizer's point of view and figure out what flows are relevant for them. And the best way to do that is, once you've picked your point of view, go meet them. Find out through their eyes where the flow breaks for them. Where do they feel hotspots occur for them? Once you've met them, convert what you've seen, heard or felt into what we call why can't you statements. So for example, we spoke to the fans and you sensed what they really want to do is get close to the action. It might be, why can't you get me really close to the action from my seat? Now for the fun part. Put this question up on the wall, get 5 people who are completely unlike you into a room and tell them, find as many ways you can to answer this question. That's your brainstorm. And from the lot, pick the ideas which extend their experience. Remember, sensors are extensors. So for example, one guy might say, what if it was like reality television in the stadium and everybody's cell phone was like a shared camera? So now you're getting warm. You have a concept. Now go figure out what are the parameters that the sensor needs to sense. So for example, you may want to know the phones closest to you, or the phones which give you the best view, or which phones are even available to you. So those are your parameters. Now you're almost there. People understand best in stories. So put together a tiny story, call it a mini story, told from the perspective of the fan in this case. And pitch it back to the fan to see if he loves it. If he does, you have something to do. Otherwise, you missed something when you were interviewing. Go back, try it again, and make a second pitch. And if they loved it, awesome, get busy making. There's nothing like having people waiting for your product even before you've made it. And we're using the exact same process to solve a problem around women and safety. Okay, so I hope you had fun and this was interesting. There's more material available, but like I said, it's really best done as a workshop. And I would love to hear from you. Mail me back whether you used it, whether you found it useful or not, whether you want a workshop at this address. Bye for now.